Hey, what are you doing? Getting into stuff? What's going on, YouTube? My name is Trey Kepsel, this is Alessandra Kepsel, and this is Elk Motorsport. In today's video, I'm going to be upgrading the coolant lines for the My Turbo kit. I currently just have rubber lines with some brass gnarled fittings, and I'm looking to upgrade them to some AN style fittings so that way they're easier to take on and off. As of right now, anytime I want to pull the turbo, I pretty much just destroy the rubber hose getting it off of that gnarling. It just rips the hose apart. So that's what we're going to do today, and I'll just give you a walk down, run around of what the setup currently looks like. I've actually already pulled the CV carb and the charge pipe off of the My Turbo kit so that way you guys get a better look. The way this setup works is on the back of the intake manifold, there are two hoses. This big one that feeds the heater core and this rear one. This rear one would normally feed the water choke on the stock Hitachi carburetor, but I have it running back around the firewall. It goes underneath, right here, it goes underneath the brake master cylinder and brake booster. Comes along the side of the air compressor air tank, and then it comes into the turbo. And then, you know, as it makes its way through the cartridge or the core of the turbo, it comes out the other end, follows the exact same path around. She loves this Zuki. Don't you, baby girl? You love the Zuki? It comes around and comes up and enters the rear of this adapter block. Heats up the block, comes out this hose, and makes its way around to the crossover tube that goes into the rear of the water pump. Those rubber hoses, the fittings that they're attached to are just like this. And I had to pull that turbo off I had to fix the oil return mating surface. That gasket was leaking oil, so I actually I couldn't do it on the vehicle. I had to pull the cartridge out of the turbo because I didn't want to take the turbo all the way off. I didn't have any gaskets at the time. I got gaskets now, but at the time that I did that, I didn't have gaskets. So I undid the worm gear clamps on the turbo side where the hosing was, and this gnarling and that rubber hose, they work so well, I don't think they need the worm gear clamps because I pulled and pulled and pulled. I ended up having to get a pair of long needle nose pliers, and I had to yank that hose so hard that it destroyed the actual rubber hose. I actually had to cut about an inch off of the hose, and I shortened my length to get them off. In the event that I need to remove the turbo again, I'm not gonna have enough line to cut an inch off and replace it. And that's just kind of, to me, it's just pointless. It's not very effective as far as maintenance wise. I ran that together because I'd mentioned in a previous video about running into high temperatures or higher temperatures with the turbo when boost would come on. So I had this idea that it's probably the charged air. So I figured maybe if I ran coolant, how it's designed to be run in the Volkswagen and Audi setup, that I could help keep the turbine housing cooler by extracting some of that heat with coolant. It didn't change that temperature spike that I would see under boost driving down the road whatsoever. The only thing that this setup really offers is that it will help cool the oil that goes to the turbo to lubricate the bearings of the turbo. It's not bad to run it this way, but it's not effective for maintenance purposes. I can't just pull the hoses off very easily. So what I want to do is I want to put some AN fittings that have the corresponding NPT fittings into the turbo and the water block. And then I will take, whether it be a straight or this 90 AN fitting, I'll get a hose that'll press on the same style as that. I won't need a worm gear clamp, it should be just fine, it's so tight. And then I'll be able to thread it, and then I will have my pre-ran length of hose. I'll be able to take it off and put it back on whenever I need to do any sort of maintenance, pull the turbo, whatever. So that's what we're gonna get into right now. Now I'm going to show you what you need to build these lines. First, you're going to need your fittings and your hose. If you decide to use this method instead of the reusable style, you're going to need a cup of really hot water, like scalding hot water. And what you're going to do is you're going to put the end of the hose that you're going to put into the fitting into the water. And you're going to let it sit there for a little bit so that way the rubber gets more pliable. It'll help push them on. And then there's a couple of tools if you want to do AN fittings that I highly suggest that you use. One of them is this magnetic aluminum fitting block. How you use this is you take it and you put it in your vise. The magnets on there help it stay on the jaws. And what this does, it allows you to put the fittings in without marring them up, because a vise will mar them up. The idea behind this is that the jaws are aluminum, the fittings aluminum, they're both anodized, so that way they're kind of cushioning each other and it holds it in place. The knurling on the actual vise will tear these fittings up. I've done it before, thinking I could get by without doing it. Some people do, some people put rags in there, but if you're gonna build a lot of lines, which I plan on doing for this, spend the 15, 20 bucks on this and go ahead and get it. Also get yourself a nice set of AN wrenches. I'll put a link in the description of where I got these from. I got them off of eBay, so I'll put a link in the description telling you where to get these at. Once you've let your hose sit in this water for a little bit and get nice and hot and pliable, take it out of the water, and then you just need to take it and push it on the fitting until it butts up against the flat surface of the fitting where it can't go anymore. Push it all the way on there. They say you're not supposed to use any type of lubricant because it could make it come off, but there are companies that sell lubricant specifically for this. But as you can see, those barbs actually on this fitting, look at how that hose pulls. It doesn't want to come off. And the other thing too that people say, well, once it heats up, won't it want to come off? Well, aluminum actually expands double the rate of steel, so this fitting and these barbs are going to expand along with the hose. So obviously this right here is more than the pressure of an actual coolant system, I promise. And then this heats up and this is gonna get bigger, it's not going to come off. People use these type of fittings on race cars whenever they make a hose that is just probably never gonna get taken apart again. This is one of those AN wrenches that I was talking about. They're made out of aluminum, they don't have a lot of leverage so you can't over torque that fitting. And they're designed to be aluminum so they're soft, so that way they won't mar up the fitting. If you use a steel adjustable wrench, you'll take the anodizing right off of it. These will not do that. All AN wrenches are the same size. Like an AN6 is particular size. I have it written down, I can't remember off the top of my head. But if you go shopping for AN fittings, if you go for the cheapest fitting, they will not be the same size as this wrench. Whether or not that actually affects the sealing or the ability for it to prevent leaks, I'm not quite sure. All I know is that you won't be able to use an AN wrench. You'll have to use an adjustable wrench, and because they're made out of steel, they will actually mar the fitting. The nice thing about just going ahead and kind of biting the bullet, I'm not saying that you have to go buy Earl's fittings or Russell fittings, high-end fittings that paying for a name in that case. Like a lot of the fittings that I use, these are just a brand that I saw that had really high sales and good reviews on eBay. One of the fittings that I like to use that are all black are these right here. They're actually made by a company called Boostech, and they're somewhere in the middle as far as price goes. They can run for these AN10 like $15, which sounds like a lot of money, but if you go to Russell's or Earl's, you'll spend like $30 on a fitting. These fittings aren't cheap. They are nice though because they're reusable. You don't have to worry about shoving out a barb, not being able to get it off. It's really easy to take on and off for maintenance. So they are nice. The Boostech fittings, they only come in black. That's like the only thing they offer, but they're in the middle and they are quality fittings. They're nice. That oil cooler doesn't leak at all. So let's go ahead and run these coolant lines. Got the turbo lines on, got everything snugged up. Now I just need to put coolant in the cooling system. Something that I just got off of eBay that I highly recommend if you don't already have, you should get one, is a replica of the Suzuki Samurai factory service manual. There is a ton of technical data in here, and something that I actually experimented with to get the temperature under control on this vehicle was I experimented with different ratios of water to coolant. And what's funny is I got this book and I looked it up, and what I ended up settling on is actually a spec that they suggest for the outside ambient air temperature that I have down here in South Texas. So instead of wasting all that coolant and all that experimentation, I could have just had the service manual and I could have gone straight to that from the get-go. So that would have saved me a lot of time. So let me show y'all what I discovered. So in the service manual, it actually talks about you can use a mixture of 70% water and 30% coolant for a market where ambient temperature does not fall below -16 degrees Celsius or 3 degrees Fahrenheit, which is what my temperature is here in South Texas. So in the manual, it talks about using a particular type of coolant. It talks about using Golden Cruiser 1200, which from what I've found online, all that is it's a non-silicate based coolant. So what I use, because what's readily available at the parts store, is the Peaks Long Life for all makes and models. It's a non-silicate based coolant, which is supposed to be the preferred type of coolant you're supposed to use because of the aluminum and preventing it from corroding. Something else that I use in my coolant setup because of the turbo and it running hotter is wetter water. Now from what I've seen online, a lot of guys in the tuner world and the tuner forums talk about you can use soft soap. You can just like put a squirt of soft soap in there. Whether or not that works, I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was like an old school type of drag racing trick that they figured out. Like on the strip, you're supposed to limit the amount of lubricants you can use, so they use straight water. And the whole purpose of using water is because of its molecular structure, it can get right up against the water jackets and it actually dissipates heat better than coolant does. So the whole idea of this wetter water is it's supposed to magnify that effect of being able to wick heat away from the metal. Soft soap can do it if you know if that works, and it's cheaper than doing this because this stuff is expensive. Nice thing about our Suzuki Samurai in the capacity that we have, it's like 5 liters or it's 4.8 liters. You only have to use half a bottle of this. I'm gonna use the 70% water and 30% coolant ratio just because I don't see below freezing. You know, it never gets to 3 degrees Fahrenheit where I live at all. So that's what we're gonna do next. Now we need to start the engine and get this thing bled out. Well guys, I let it run for about 15 minutes. Ever since I got that aluminum radiator, whenever I start it up and it just sits in idles, it will really not get above 160, 175. It doesn't really creep up that much. Only on the highway, whenever the motor's under boost, will it go above that 200 to 210 marker. It's done. Coolant's been filled, been bled, reservoir's filled up. Those turbo lines weren't leaking. With that part, I'm gonna need to go on an actual test drive and put them underneath boost application, get that motor hot, and then cool it back down, then hot, then cool it back down, just to double check, but I'll let y'all know. Otherwise than that, I think it looks great. It's a lot more manageable as far as maintenance wise. I wanna thank y'all for watching this video. If it was something that y'all enjoyed, be sure to hit like. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so that way you can stay up to date on what I've got going on in the shop, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.